السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلله فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدًا عبده ورسوله صلى الله تبارك وتعالى عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه وبارك وسلم تسليما كثيرا كثيرا أما بعد. We had in our last session discussed those verses in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us the imperative to worship Him, but also gives us the reasons why we should worship Him. And in a very beautiful and logical sequence, the Quran one by one enumerates all of the causes, the reasons, the wisdoms, the sense behind why we should worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This was covered in some detail. Then the Quran made a series of challenges that if you have some doubt in this book, then try to duplicate it, try to come up with something that's like it. And these are placed at numerous points in the Quran. We talked about those. And at one point Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that bring something like this, bring anything like this Quran. So after all attempts were made and they failed, Allah says, look, you have not been able to and you won't be able to. Then instead of arguing about this Quran or raising doubts about this Quran, you should worry about your final destination. Because at the end, everyone has to stand in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and give answers and give an account for the way they spent their life and what pursuits they spent their life in. So the Quran, wherever it gives warnings, it also gives glad tidings. This is one of the reasons why it's called Al-Mathani, because the meanings, the topics are paired. So right after that warning of busy yourself and occupy yourself with trying to save yourself from the fire of Jahannam, the fuel of which is men and stones. It has been prepared for the disbelievers. After that, the Quran says, but at the same time, give glad tidings. That's where we are commencing from today, from verse number 25. وَبَشِّرِ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ أَنَّ لَهُمْ جَنَّاتٍ تَجْرِي مِنْ تَحْتِهَا الْأَنْهَارُ كُلَّمَا رُزِقُوا مِنْهَا مِنْ ثَمَرَةٍ رِزْقًا قَالُوا هَذَا الَّذِي رُزِقْنَا مِنْ قَبْلُ وَأُتُوا بِهِ مُتَشَابِهًا وَلَهُمْ فِيهَا أَزْوَاجٌ مُطَهَّرَةٌ وَهُمْ فِيهَا خَالِدُونَ. Give glad tidings to those who believed, who had Iman. Had Iman, here this is in fact a summary of their life story. They lived by it. They lived by Iman. And they died with Iman. And they spent their life growing, nurturing, protecting, preserving their Iman. And not just their faith and their belief and their spirituality, but also good deeds. وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ. Salihat literally means those things which are suitable, those things which are whole, those things which are intact. Amilu salihat, those deeds which are whole and intact. This refers to a person doing those deeds which have been labeled as good deeds. Deeds that please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Deeds that entail the Islamic ethics and morals, deeds of kindness, generosity, forgiveness, patience, and all of those deeds that pertain to the rights of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the rights of mankind. So salihat, meaning that they are eligible for acceptance. The literal meaning. They are salih lil qabul indallah. And they are sound, meaning they have been preserved. A person does a deed, that's one thing. But then to preserve that deed, it's another step. A person goes for Hajj, mashallah, right now, many of our brothers and sisters have left for Hajj. A person goes for Hajj. This was one whole package of sacrifice and effort. But then they have to preserve that Hajj as well, because they did many, many good deeds and made many prayers and made many intentions. But to uphold it and to keep it preserved and not do anything that they have pledged Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that they won't, this is the next step. Similarly, preserving the sincerity. Sometimes a person begins a deed sincerely, but then other intentions get involved while they're doing the deed. Sometimes other intentions come into the mind after a person has done the deed. And it comes to mind that, well, maybe I can use this deed as a means of showing, displaying, letting people know, or whatever the case may be. So, preserving the deed, keeping it salih, keeping it eligible for acceptance means that even after the deed has done, we have to look out that shaitan does not snatch it away from us and make us lose all the reward and all the effort that we made for it. So those people, amanu wa aminu salihat. This comes again and again in the Quran. Illa alladhina amanu wa aminu salihat. Sometimes we translate it literally and we just keep it to a very small and limited meaning. Amanu, okay, they had belief. Okay, I have belief. Aminu salihat, they did some good deeds. Well, I do some good deeds as well. And right away we think that we have fulfilled the criterion. We have fulfilled the condition that the Quran has laid in those passages, in those verses. But like I mentioned, this is in fact the story of their life. It's a life of iman and amal. And truly, anyone who has started walking down this path knows that protecting and preserving one's iman and growing it, and correcting one's amal, leaving bad amal, coming to good amal, and then making that your priority in life, this is a whole mission. This is a whole life's effort. It's not a small thing. Amanu wa aminu salihat is not a small thing. In fact, this is the biography of a believer, summarized. Amanu wa aminu salihat. In every one of their actions, in every juncture of their life, you'll find a reflection. You'll find decisions that they made in light of their beliefs. Compromises that they made because of their beliefs. Things that they sacrificed because of their beliefs. And you'll find that at every step of their life, they were always trying to do the right thing, trying to do the right deeds, trying to do what was required from them, what was desired from them by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what was the better option for them. This was the struggle, their lifelong struggle. And everyone gets tested within this struggle in various ways, from various directions, with various intensities of tests. But at the end, this is what we want the story of our life to be summarized as. When we stand in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we want the summary of our book of deeds to read just like this. Amanu wa aminu salihat. That we were from those people who lived by these two things, and we dedicated our life to upholding these two things. Now those who managed to do this, those who have intended to do it, those who have decided to do this, then tell them, give them glad tidings. Bashir literally means to put a smile on their face. To put a smile on their face, make them happy. Anna lahum jannat. Verily, for them are gardens. Now, jannatin tajri min tahtiha al-anhar. This is also something that is repeated in the Quran. So let's talk about jannat first. Jannah is the singular, jannat is its plural. Jannah yajunnu literally means for something to cover something. That's why madness is called junoon. Madness, insanity is called junoon, because it is a state that covers a person's ability to reason and think logically. It's completely covered. Now, Jannat, gardens are called the Jannat because of the denseness. They are so dense and thick that each blade of grass is hiding the next because it's grouped so close to it. The trees are so dense that they're hiding one another. A person who stands in between is concealed because of the denseness, the thickness of the greenery, of the plants, the flowers, the trees, the shrubs, all of the beautiful things that are growing there. It's talking about dense and thick. Jannat. And there are other terms for garden in the Quran. Bustan, for example, means garden. Hadiqa means garden. And in hadith, the word ha'it has been used as garden. There are many different words. But Jannat are gardens that don't have any borders or walls or boundaries. These are gardens that seem to have no end. They just go on and on and on and on. No limitations, no restrictions. Tajri min tahtiha al-anhar means that these gardens are not flat. This is actually telling us the landscape of these gardens. That within these gardens there are hills and mountains and there are valleys. And I'm not so sure about Australia. I haven't seen enough of it, but I will, inshallah, in a matter of time. But come to Canada, come to Vancouver and explore the mountains around Vancouver, the Okanagan Valley. And you see this mandhar, this scene over and over and over again. Lush green hills and mountains tapering off into a beautiful, vast river that's flowing. And you see this over, and it's one of the most captivating things. It's not always a mountain filled with trees that's ending at a river, but you see these massive hills, these big slopes, and on those slopes you see all kinds of different vegetation, and it slowly tapers into this beautiful river. Sometimes it's a creek, sometimes it's whitewater rapids, sometimes it's a fast-flowing river, sometimes it's a massive river that is, it seems like it's still, as if it's made of glass, it's not moving. And sometimes, depending on the surroundings, it's green, sometimes it's blue, sometimes it's turquoise. And when you look at that, you think of these verses, that how beautiful must the gardens of Jannah be. So imagine you peek over and you're looking down this hill which is rich with all of these beautiful plants and flowers and trees with all kinds of fruits that are about to be mentioned, and then it all leads down to these rivers. Except the rivers aren't just water. Anharum min ma'in ghayri asin. There are some that do have water, but there are other rivers that have milk. Labanin lam yataghayyar ta'amuh. And there are rivers of honey, asalin musaffa. There are some from khamrin laddatin lisharibin, rivers of wine. So rivers of water, and amongst those rivers of water, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given different names. There is the river of Salsabil, there is the river of Tasneem, and then they have these rivers of milk, but the milk was not produced from the bellies of animals. You have honey, rivers of honey, but the honey did not come from the bellies of bees. You have rivers of wine, but that wine was not made from grapes that were crushed. These are all coming directly from the treasures of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So now imagine again, Jannatin tajri min tahtiha al-anhar. The gardens, we haven't described the gardens yet in detail. The Quran talks about them. Read Surah Ar-Rahman. It talks about those gardens, what they will look like, the color, and the types of plants that you will have there, the types of fruits, the types of flowers. You'll have so many things there. But here, very short and brief. Jannatin tajri min tahtiha, from beneath. So the gardens are above and the rivers are flowing beneath them. كُلَّمَا رُزِقُوا مِنْهَا مِنْ ثَمَرَةٍ رِزْقًا. Every time they will be provided fruit from it, and the fruits of Jannah are mentioned in the Quran. All different kinds of fruits will be provided there. And وَجَنَى الْجَنَّتَيْنِ دَانٍ. It'll be close. In fact, as the person of Jannah will walk, the trees themselves, the branches will lower themselves so that the fruit of that branch comes within his hand's reach, within his arm's reach. He just has to grab it and pluck it. So they will be lowered and they will be close. And they will get whatever fruit they desire. Whatever fruit they desire, they will get. But here's the interesting thing. They will have names, labels for fruits, but the flavor, the texture, none of the things will be anything like the things of this dunya. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أَعْدَدْتُ لِعِبَادِيَ الصَّالِحِينَ مَا لَا عَيْنٌ رَأَتْ وَلَا أُذُنٌ سَمِعَتْ وَلَا خَطَرَ عَلَى قَلْبِ بَشَرٍ وَقْرَأُوا إِن شِئْتُمْ فَلَا تَعْلَمُ نَفْسٌ مَا أُخْفِيَ لَهُم مِّن قُرَّةِ أَعْيُنٍ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that I have prepared for my pious slaves such bounties that no eye has seen, no ear has heard of, and even the thought of those have not crossed anyone's imagination. And then Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, if you want, read this ayat of the Quran, it's saying the same thing. No one knows, فَلَا تَعْلَمُ نَفْسٌ. No soul knows, مَا أُخْفِيَ لَهُم مِّن قُرَّةِ أَعْيُنٍ. What has been concealed for them, what has been stored from them, what happiness, what joys, what pleasures lie awaiting for them. So, there will be something called a pomegranate. There will be something called grapes. There will be things with all of these names. كُلَّمَا رُزِقُوا مِنْهَا مِنْ ثَمَرَةٍ رِزْقًا. Whenever they will be provided from its fruits. قَالُوا هَذَا الَّذِي رُزِقْنَا مِنْ قَبْلِ. They will say, yes, this name, we used to eat something called this in dunya as well. We used to eat something called grapes in dunya as well. وَأُتُوا بِهِ مُتَشَابِهًا. Allah says, but the similarity of the fruits of Jannah to the fruits of dunya is only in name. It's only in name. The tashabuh, the similarity is only in name. Nothing else will be the same. In fact, some narrations mention that each bite from the fruit will have a different flavor, and its flavor will be better than the previous one. And a person will continue to eat and eat and eat. And in Jannah, you don't eat because you're hungry, because there's no hunger. Just like you don't drink because you're thirsty, because there's no thirst. You eat because you feel like it. Until you feel like it, you keep on eating. When you feel like eating something else, then something else will come into your hand. And like this, it will go on and on and on. وَلَهُمْ فِيهَا أَزْوَاجٌ مُطَهَّرَةٌ. And for them, in those gardens, in Jannah, will be spouses that have been purified. Azwajum mutahhara. For men, women that are purified. For women, men that are purified. Purified from what? In Jannah, the people of Jannah will not have to relieve themselves. They will not have to go to the toilet. They will not have to pass urine and stool. And they will not have any form of najasa, any form of impurity coming out of their bodies. So women also will not have any type of impurity coming out of their bodies. So they will have been purified from all of this. In one hadith is mentioned, رَشْحُهُمُ الْمِسْكِ, that they will sweat and their sweat will be of the fragrance of musk. In some narrations, it's mentioned that how will the food be digested? A person will maybe just burp once and all their food will be digested. So, no impurities in Jannah. وَلَهُمْ فِيهَا أَزْوَاجٌ مُطَهَّرَةٌ. And Mufassirin have mentioned that purified here, mutahhar means purified, mutahhara, purified means physically and spiritually and emotionally. In other words, they will be cleansed of any negative attitudes, any negative behaviors, any hurtful type of speech. إِلَّا قِيلًا سَلَامًا سَلَامًا. The only words there will be of salam, of peace. So their tongues will have been cleansed, their hearts will have been cleansed, and their characters will be pure. And like this, everyone will enter into Jannah with beautiful akhlaq. So no physical impurity, no emotional, psychological, or spiritual impurity. Completely pure. وَهُمْ فِيهَا خَالِدُونَ. And there they will remain forever. There is no time limit. There is no temporariness about akhirah, about Jannah. Once a person enters into Jannah, then they don't need to leave it ever again. When people enter into Jannah, it will be announced that, O people of Jannah, today you will be happy and you will never be upset again. Today you will enjoy and you will never see pain again. Today you will be healthy and you will never feel sick again. Today you will be content and you will never feel in need ever again. These announcements will be made in Jannah for the people of Jannah. Now, there are some people who have tried to reinterpret the verses of the Quran, especially the verses pertaining to akhirah, and they have tried to change its interpretation so that it implies something allegorical, something metaphorical, that this is an allegory, this is a metaphor, this is not real. They have tried to say this. Who are these people? These are people of different backgrounds. Some are of the group that are called the Batiniya. And Batiniya are groups of people who always say that the written meaning is different from the implied meaning. It's implying something else. It says one thing, but it's implying something else. So they look at everything as metaphors. They look at everything as a representation of something else. So if there is mention of Jannah, gardens, fruit, and women of Jannah, men of Jannah, you see, there's no such thing. They're just various types of bliss. These are representations of various types of bliss, various types of happiness that the soul will feel, but there is no actual place called Jannah. Now that's a very daring thing to say. It's a very dangerous thing to say. So some of them are Batiniya. They look at the entire Quran like this, as if it's all metaphorical. It's not really saying what it's saying. Others are would-be modernists who are trying to reconcile the Quran with the teachings or the beliefs of atheists, and are trying to, according to their perspective, reconcile the Quran with modern science. So they start going down that path, and because they have in fact become worshippers of science, they will put aside the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they will either ignore what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, or they will ignore what Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is saying, and they will try to come out as the interpreters, as those who are going to interpret Quran now, those who are going to interpret Hadith now. So, in both cases, people have gone astray. In both cases, it's not to say that the Quran doesn't have metaphors. The Quran does have metaphors. But it is when there is something that is a part and parcel of our belief system. Jannah and Jahannam are part and parcel of our belief system. Those are beliefs that we do not compromise. Now, any interpretation that comes and tries to compromise that, this is not an interpretation, this is kufr. It is disbelief. And someone who subscribes to those types of interpretations has actually gone down the path of disbelief, and the Quran talks about this up ahead in the next verse. So, there are many people offering would-be intellectual perspectives or reason-based explanations of the Quran. But remember that when something contradicts with the usul, with the foundations of deen, with the fundamentals of your beliefs, there is no room to cater to it. There is no accommodation of that. It's invalid, it's baseless. Now I've had interactions with these types of people in the past. And it's a very strange spin that they put on everything. It's a very strange spin. But it seems as if these people are trying to say that the Quran that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam explained in the way that he explained it, and in the way that Muslims have always understood it for over 1400 years, all of that was fake. All of that was unknown. It was vague, and it was hidden behind the vaults of reasoning until these people came and opened those vaults. It's blasphemy. So, just like that, there are people who will offer interpretations to many aspects of the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But to keep everyone honest and to keep tafsir from being misused, the term tafsir being misused, there are some very clear principles for tafsir, for what constitutes tafsir and what cannot constitute tafsir. And we spoke a little bit about this before starting this series, but just as a very quick refresher, the first source for understanding the Quran is the Quran itself. The Quran will explain itself in many, many ways. This is one of the reasons why the same concept is brought up over and over again in different ways, different tones, different levels of detail. It's explaining itself. It explains itself by explaining the words. Those words are explained in another place. It also explains concepts. Those concepts are explained in other places in much more detail. So the Quran is doing that. It's the first source of tafsir. If somebody is interpreting the Quran in a way that contradicts the Quran itself, it's baseless, we will reject it. The next most important source of tafsir is the life and teachings of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now some people, they raise a very childish kind of objection. They say, well, you're saying that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam explained the Quran, then how come we don't see in the books of hadith these narrations where Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam is reading verse by verse by verse, and at each verse he's explaining what it means? How come you don't have a whole tafsir from Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam if that's the case? But like I said, this is a very childish and immature question, because first of all, you do have those narrations. You do have those narrations where Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam is reading a part of the Quran and is explaining to the Sahaba what it means. The second thing is that all of the topics covered in the Quran, from beginning to end, they are all explained in the hadith of Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam does not have to say that this is the tafsir of such and such ayat. Let me give you an example. The Quran talks about salat. The Quran talks about salat. It says, aqimus salah and aqimus salah over and over again. It vaguely mentions some of the times of salat. It mentions the timings of salat. Now, where will you get the details for how to pray salat? The Quran does not talk about how to pray. The Quran does not talk about how to pray even one salat. What are you supposed to do from beginning to end? There's no mention of it. But there are hundreds and hundreds. There are in fact thousands of ahadith pertaining just to salat. All of those ahadith will constitute tafsir of the ayat of salat. The Quran talks about wudu in a very concise way. There are hundreds of ahadith that elucidate, that explain what wudu is and what the ahkam of wudu are. Similarly, take any topic that is raised in the Quran, you'll find the hadith literature opening it up and explaining it. That's why you cannot have an understanding of the Quran without having an understanding of hadith, or without reverting to hadith to get the details of what the Quran is actually telling us to do. Otherwise, it's for anyone to decide then what aqimus salah means. Pray, just says pray. Doesn't say how. So somebody will stand up and raise their hands and say, okay, I've prayed. Somebody will lie down and say, okay, I've prayed. Somebody will sing a song and say, I've prayed. Somebody will say a prayer in their head, say, I've prayed. Yani, it's just to suggest something like this, that your deen is so vague and is so incomplete, it's an insult to you. You cannot insult the deen. It's an insult to your intelligence. Yet you have a group of people who negate the validity of hadith. They don't see hadith as a source of knowledge. They say, oh, this was something that was compiled 300 years later, which is a lie. It is a lie. And they say that no, this is, there's no way to gauge the authenticity. It's another lie. It's a series of lies built into one another, and one lie feeding off another lie, just so that, and all of this is engineered just to get people to be able to decide what the Quran is saying for themselves. Don't put restrictions on us. So now if somebody wants the Quran to be interpreted to suit the mindset of a Hindu culture, they will make the Quran sound as if it's promoting Hinduism. If somebody wants it to suit a Buddhist culture, they will interpret the Quran so that it suits Buddhism. If somebody wants to use the Quran to comply with Christian beliefs, they will use it for that. Somebody will use it for Jewish beliefs. Somebody will use it for the next thing. This is what is wanted, that let us play with the Quran and make it into whatever we want. However, in every era, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala produced people of haqq who stood up and clarified it and removed the doubts of people. And they called out the troublemakers, the misinterpreters, the charlatans who came out of nowhere and all of a sudden started offering these false pseudo-interpretations of the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it continues even today. That is not the problem. The problem has never been that people haven't given an answer to those people. That has never been the problem. People have always given an answer. People have always clarified. The problem is that the masses, it seems like there are people within the masses that are waiting to be confused. They're begging to be confused. Give us something to confuse us. So what happens today? People will, just by knee-jerk reaction, they will click on every link that offers something to do with Islam. Even just as curiosity. When did this happen? Could you imagine 50 years ago that people are going through libraries and trying to find books written by people who don't know anything about Islam to learn about Islam? Why then would you click on a source that you don't know? If you don't know the source, leave it. Go to authentic sources and stay with them. It's that simple. It's not complicated at all. The complications are created by people for themselves. Of course, there are going to be people that are conveying wrong messages, incorrect messages. They've always been around. Since day one, they have been around. Such people were around in the time of Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So what are people supposed to do? Go and turn to them and then keep coming back to Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and say, now he's saying this, can you answer this? Now he's saying this, can you answer this? Now he's saying this, can you answer this? What is this? You have the teachings of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam in front of you, stay with them. You have those who understand those teachings, stay with them. So the Quran and the Hadith and the understanding that the Sahaba took of the Book of Allah, we cannot be independent of that. They're the people who saw the Quran being revealed and they saw what Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam did when the Quran was revealed. So you cannot discount their understanding and their interpretations of the verses, because they don't have any of their own interpretations. They are taking what they heard and saw Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam saying and doing. After that, they're students. Those students who spent decades with the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, learning and understanding and mastering the Quran. This is where tafsir begins. Yes, Arabic, the Arabic language is one source of understanding the words. This is also a problem today. People have gotten so, they have over-glorified the Arabic aspect of tafsir to make it look like all of tafsir lies in the Arabic. All of tafsir does not lie in the Arabic. The understanding of words, the understanding of the beauty of the Quranic text lies in Arabic. But you have to master Arabic to a very high degree. When you can understand, when you have mastered the funun or the ulum of balagha, ilm al-bayan, and ilm al-badi' and ilm al-ma'ani, once you've mastered those, then you will understand the beauty of the Quranic text. But to say that all of tafsir lies in just understanding the Arabic aspect of it, this is misleading people, because it does not. But it is one source of understanding the Quranic words, to correctly understand the Quranic words and their implications. Yes, fiqhul lugha is a beautiful science. Then after that, the logical conclusions that are formed based on keeping all of deen in front of us, that is also included in tafsir at the very end. Now you have in front of you the template for what tafsir is actually supposed to consist of. So this is not somebody sitting down and saying, this is what this verse made me feel, or this is what this verse made me think, this is what came to my mind, this is what I see, this is what I understand. No. It's not the understanding. Tafsir is not the understanding of men. Yes, until Yawm al-Qiyamah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will keep opening up new things from the Quran. Because this book is such, لَا تَنْقَضِي عَجَائِبُهُ. Its wonders will never cease. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will keep opening up new aspects of the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala according to the needs of that time, to Ahlul Ilm, and that is a process that will continue inshaAllah. It's a part of the preservation of the Quran. So these are a few reflections on this verse. Up ahead, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about the examples that He gives in the Quran and people who challenge those examples. Inshallah, we will cover that in our next session, which will be in the week after next, because this coming Monday is Eid, inshallah, Eid al-Adha, and then on the Monday after that we will resume by the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.